Hey there, deep divers. You've been digging into the spiritual seek, right? Their samurai quiz caught my eye, too. Pretty clever way to explore that warrior culture, huh? Want to see what it reveals about them and maybe even ourselves?
Yeah. These quizzes are always interesting. This one especially, it's a good way to look at the samurai values and beliefs that made them who they were.
Right. So let's get into it. First question. Which famous Japanese text outlines strategies for warfare and philosophy for samurai life? We've got Genji Monogatari, Kojiki, or Hagakure. I'm kind of leaning towards Hagakure. What do you think?
Yeah, you're on the right track. Genji Monogatari is about courtly life, and Kojiki is like the basics of Japanese mythology. But Hagakure, which means hidden leaves, gets to the core of how samurai were supposed to act. What's interesting is it was written in the 1700s, way after all the Sengoku period fighting.
So how does Hagakure fit into a time when there wasn't much war? Were samurai having a tough time finding their place without all the battles?
Exactly. Imagine training for generations to fight, to be courageous and loyal on the battlefield. And then suddenly there's no battlefield. Hagakure is all about this change, how samurai adapted their Bushido code to a new era.
Makes sense. But if it wasn't about swordsmanship anymore, what did Bushido look like in peacetime?
Think of it like this. The battlefield changed. From actual combat to navigating social situations, politics, and personal conduct, loyalty was still key. But it might mean giving your lord good advice, or managing land effectively. Courage might mean standing up for what you believe in, even if it risks your position.
So Bushido became more about who you were on the inside, more about personal integrity than showing strength outwardly.
Yeah, and Hagakure shows us this shift. It reveals a side of the samurai beyond that image of the stoic warrior.
Okay, question 2. What term refers to a masterless samurai? The choices are Shogun, Daimyo, or Ronin. What do you think of first?
Well, the Shogun was the big military guy. The Daimyo were powerful lords. But it's the Ronin that are really interesting. These were samurai who, for different reasons, didn't have a master.
A masterless samurai. It sounds kind of romantic, like a lone wolf wandering around looking for adventure.
There's definitely a romantic element to it. But their life was probably way more complicated. Imagine those times loyalties changing political chaos. A samurai could lose their master because of death disgrace or even their whole clan falling apart.
Wow. So what happened to these Ronin? Did they just wander aimlessly, or was there some structure to their lives?
That's where it gets interesting. Some did become wanderers looking for a new purpose or a new master. Others became mercenaries, selling their skills to whoever paid the most. And of course, some turned to less honorable things, using their skills just to survive.
It's like you see all of human nature in these masterless samurai. Some holding on to Bushido, others letting go of it completely.
Exactly, and that's what makes them so fascinating. They show both the good and the bad of samurai culture. They make us question ideas of honor duty and what it means to live by a code.
All right, question 3, a vocab test. What does Bushido translate to in English? Is it the way of peaceful living, the path of enlightenment, or the way of the warrior?
Well, we already talked about how Bushido was about more than just fighting. But really, it was about the warrior's path, a code that affected every part of a samurai's life. So the answer is the way of the warrior.
Simple enough. But we know it wasn't just about being strong. What were some of the core values that guided a samurai both on and off the battlefield?
Exactly. It was definitely more than just fighting. Think about virtues like Ji doing the right thing, Yu being courageous and brave, Jin being compassionate, and that's just the start.
Wow. Like a whole system of morality, not just a bunch of fighting techniques. No wonder people are still interested in it all these years later.
It shows how deep and complex samurai culture was. It wasn't just about beating enemies. It was about conquering yourself, controlling your emotions and actions to reach a higher goal.
Let's go to question 4. This gets to the heart of it. Which weapon symbolized the soul of the samurai? We've got the Yari, spear, the Yumi, longbow, or the Katana, long sword. I think we all know where this is going.
It's hard to picture a samurai without their katana. All 3 weapons were used in war, but the katana was more than just a tool. It was like a part of the samurai themselves.
What made the katana so special? Was it just how it was made, or was there something more?
It was both. Think about how carefully a katana was made, the steel folded over and over, the sharpening the perfect balance. It was art, and the samurai believed the spirit of the swordsmith was inside the blade.
So it wasn't just a weapon, it was almost like a sacred object full of spiritual energy.
Exactly. The katana showed the samurai's status, their skill, their spiritual connection to what they did. It symbolized their commitment to Bushido, a physical sign of their dedication to self-mastery and being the best they could be.
Amazing how a single object can have so much meaning, so much cultural weight. It makes you wonder what those samurai would think if they could see how we treat their swords today, displayed in museums studied by people all over the world.
It's a testament to the samurai's legacy, how their culture still fascinates us after all this time.
All right, 2 more questions, and these get into some of the harder parts of samurai culture. Question 5. What is seppuku, and why was it practiced by samurai? You can choose from a ceremonial sword dance performed during festivals, a traditional method of meditation before battle, or a form of ritual suicide to restore honor.
This one always gets people talking, and for good reason. It's the third option, a form of ritual suicide to restore honor, that really explains seppuku. It's a practice that's deeply connected to how the samurai saw duty and self-sacrifice.
It's really hard to understand it from where we are now. What kind of situation would make a samurai choose to do something so extreme?
Imagine a samurai who has brought shame on themselves or their lord, maybe losing a battle, breaking someone's trust, or failing to protect people. In their code of honor, dying was better than living with that disgrace.
So seppuku was a way to fix that, to get their honor back through the biggest sacrifice.
Exactly. It was a very serious ritual done with specific rules and total self-control. It shows how different things were back then.
Okay, last question. This goes back to how feudal Japan was structured. What was the main purpose of the samurai class? Was it to mediate between the deity and political authority? To protect the peasant class from enemy invasion? Or to act as military retainers for the ruling class? What do you think, and how does this connect to Bushido?
Spirituality and protection were important, but the core purpose of the samurai was to serve their lord, whether a daimyo or the shogun. So the answer is to act as military retainers for the ruling class, and Bushido was the foundation of this service.
So their whole life was about loyalty, duty, and supporting those in power.
Exactly. Bushido made sure they were always loyal. It controlled not just their actions in battle, but how they lived their whole lives. It was a way of life, a belief system that connected them to their lord and shaped how they saw honor, duty, and sacrifice.
Wow. We've made it through all 6 questions of the Spiritual Sikh Samurai quiz. But this is just the beginning. Now we really dig into these answers and explore samurai culture. Are you ready to go deeper to understand the complexities of Bushido, the Ronin's search for purpose, and the powerful symbolism of the katana?
Absolutely. These answers are just a starting point. They've opened a door to a world of amazing insights, and I'm excited to share them. What really strikes me about these quiz answers is that they show just how complex samurai culture was. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about philosophy, personal growth, figuring out how to live in a world that was always changing.
Yeah, I agree. It's like peeling back layers of an onion. Each question gives us a new perspective on this fascinating culture. Speaking of peeling back layers, let's go back to that question about Hagakure. You mentioned it was written during peacetime when samurai were finding new roles in society. What can you tell us about the author Yamamoto Tsunetomo, and what insights does Hagakure give us into this changing world?
Tsunetomo was an interesting guy. He served under Nobishima Mitsushi, a powerful daimyo. But when Mitsushi died, Tsunetomo didn't follow him in death through junshi, which was ritual suicide for a lord's retainers. Instead, he chose to live a quiet life, thinking and reflecting. Eventually, he put all his thoughts and teachings into Hagakure.
So he went against tradition by choosing to live after his lord died. It's pretty brave for a samurai who was all about loyalty and honor.
It was a controversial choice, for sure, but it also shows how times were changing. Remember, this was when the Tokugawa shogunate had brought peace to Japan. The samurai's role was evolving, and Tsunetomo was trying to figure out what it meant to live by Bushido in a world without war.
And that makes Hagakure even more interesting. It's like looking into the mind of a samurai who's trying to balance his warrior training with a peaceful society.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how Tsunetomo sees Bushido in this new context. He talks about always being ready not just for battle, but for anything life throws at you. He stresses discipline, self-control, and sticking to your principles, whether you're on a battlefield or dealing with court life.
So it's like he's saying, a true samurai isn't just about how well you fight. It's about how you live your life, how you act in every situation.
You got it. Hagakure encourages samurai to think about themselves, to work on their minds and spirits as much as their fighting skills. It emphasizes loyalty not just to your lord, but to what you believe in. And it talks about death not as something to be afraid of, but as something that's going to happen and should be faced with calmness and dignity.
That's deep stuff.
Yeah.
But I can see how those ideas would still speak to people today. We all face challenges. We all have to deal with difficult situations, and we all think about our own mortality.
Absolutely. That's what's so great about exploring these old philosophies. They give us insights into being human that go beyond time and culture. Hagakure might have been written for samurai, but its lessons about self-control, resilience, and finding purpose are for everyone.
Okay, let's change gears a bit and talk about those masterless samurai, the Ronin. The quiz made them sound kind of romantic, but you said earlier that their lives were much more complicated. What were some of the challenges they faced, and how did they deal with living without the structure and support of a clan?
Imagine losing your identity, your purpose, your whole social network. That's what it meant to be a Ronin. They were basically outcasts, no longer bound by the rules and protection of the samurai class.
It must have been so isolating, especially for warriors raised in a culture that valued loyalty and belonging.
For sure. And without a lord to serve a purple, Ronin had to find new ways to make a living to survive in a world that often saw them as dangerous or suspicious. Some became bodyguards, mercenaries, or even taught swordsmanship.
I can see how that would appeal to some Ronin. They could still use their skills, hold on to their warrior identity, and maybe even find a new purpose in protecting others.
Exactly. And for those who are really good, it could lead to success. There are famous stories of Ronin who became known as great swordsmen or strategists, their reputation overcoming the fact that they didn't have a master.
But what about those who weren't so lucky? Those who couldn't find honorable work or who struggled to adjust to this new life?
Sadly, not all Ronin made it in this new world. Some became poor, their skills no longer needed in peacetime. Others turned to crime, using their training to survive in the shadows. And some just couldn't deal with losing their identity and purpose, their lives filled with despair and disappointment.
It's a reminder that even within a group like the samurai, there were so many different experiences, motivations, and outcomes. Being in a Ronin was a mixed bag. It offered freedom, but also huge challenges. And how each person dealt with those challenges depended on their situation, their character, and maybe even a little bit of luck.
You're exactly right. The world of the Ronin was like a mini version of Japanese society during this time of change. It was a time of both opportunity and uncertainty, and the choices these masterless samurai made show the bigger struggle of finding your place in a world that's changing fast.
And speaking of adapting to change, let's talk about the katana being the soul of the samurai. You mentioned the craftsmanship and spiritual connection, but what about the practical side? How did a Ronin's relationship with their sword change after losing their lord? Would they still treat it with the same reverence, or would it just become a tool to survive?
That's a really good question, and it gets to the core of what the katana meant to a samurai. Remember, it wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of their status, their skill, their connection to Bushido. For a Ronin, losing their lord meant losing their place in society, but it didn't necessarily make their sword less important.
So even without a master to serve, the katana still had deep personal and symbolic meaning.
Definitely. Think of it like the sword was a constant, a physical connection to their past, their training, their identity as a samurai. It reminded them of the principles they swore to uphold, the skills they worked hard to develop, the battles they fought.
It's like the katana became even more important for a Ronin, a symbol of their strength, their determination to hold on to their warrior identity, even when things were tough.
Exactly. And even though their lives might have changed, their dedication to their sword, to the art of swordsmanship, often stayed strong. For some, it became a source of comfort, a way to connect with their inner strength and discipline. For others, it was a way to protect themselves, a way to survive in a world where people often didn't trust them.
And as you said earlier, the katana could also be a way for Ronin to make money, whether by teaching, protecting people, or even sadly doing things that weren't so honorable.
That's true. But even in those cases, the sword was more than just a way to make a living. It was a part of them, a physical representation of their skills and heritage. And I think that's what makes the katana such a powerful symbol even today. It represents not just the warrior spirit of the samurai, but also the human ability to be strong, to adapt, and to strive for excellence even when things are hard.
Okay, we've talked about a lot already, the complexities of Hagakure, the challenges faced by Ronin, and the symbolism of the katana. But there's one question from the quiz that I think needs more attention, one that really gets to the core of the samurai code seppuku. It's such a hard concept to understand, this idea of ritual suicide to restore honor. Can you explain the history of seppuku, the rituals involved, and what it tells us about how the samurai saw the world?
Yeah, seppuku, it's definitely a tough one to wrap your head around.
Right.
Even for people who know a lot about samurai history, it wasn't just suicide, it was this whole ritual full of meaning.
The quiz mentioned restoring honor. But what did that actually mean for a samurai? What situations would make them choose this path?
It all comes from the idea that a samurai's honor was everything, more important than life itself. Losing a battle, failing to protect your lord, even being accused of being a coward or dishonest. Those things could completely ruin your honor.
So seppuku was like a way to wash away that stain, to show that even though their body had failed, their spirit was still strong.
Right. It was about taking control when you've been defeated or disgraced, showing you were still in charge of your own fate. And it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. Seppuku was done with so much ceremony and self-control. It's hard to imagine now.
What were some of those rituals? What made seppuku more than just taking your own life?
Usually, the samurai would take a bath dress and white robes and write a death poem, thinking about their life and why they were doing this. They might have a last meal with their friends, and then with a steady hand, they'd disembowel themselves with a tanto, a short blade.
That sounds incredibly awful and painful.
It
Is there
did.
anything to make it less horrible?
It was definitely brutal. But there was this role, a trusted friend called the kaishakunin. Their job was to quickly behead the samurai after the first cut, to make the suffering shorter and give them a more dignified end.
It's a stark reminder of how differently life and death were seen back then. But beyond all the blood and ritual, what does seppuku tell us about what the samurai believed in?
It shows how dedicated they were to their code of honor, how they accepted death as a part of life, something you face with bravery and composure, and how important self-control was even when you're in so much pain.
It's really hard to understand from our perspective today, but by looking at it, we can get a better sense of the samurai mindset, how far they were willing to go to stick to their principles.
It makes us think about our own values, too. What would we die for? What would we sacrifice for what we believe in seppuku? Might be an extreme example, but it makes us think about what matters most to us and how far we'd go to protect it.
We've gone through the spiritual Sikh samurai quiz, finding all these layers of meaning in each answer. From the changing ideas of Bushido and Hagakure to the lives of Ronin and the power of the katana, we've gotten a glimpse into this incredible warrior culture.
And by looking at seppuku, we've seen something both disturbing and insightful. It reminds us that history isn't just dates and battles. It's about trying to understand how people saw the world even when it's hard for us to grasp.
So what's the lesson for our listeners? What can we learn from the samurai even after all these years?
I think it's about finding inspiration in their dedication to bettering themselves, their unwavering loyalty to their principles, and their bravery in the face of challenges. We might not have actual battles to fight, but we all have our own struggles, our own tests.
And maybe by understanding the samurai code, even the most extreme parts, we can find new ways to deal with our own problems, to become more resilient, and to live with purpose and honor even when things are rough.
That's what makes these deep dives so great. It's not just about facts, it's about opening our minds and finding insights that apply to our own lives.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.